Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reds Room. I am your host, Sean Sparks, and my guest joining me from way down yonder in South Carolina, my good friend, Chris Gamble. Chris, how you doing? Welcome to the Reds Room.
Pretty good, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. I've been down to visit you once, maybe last year or something.
Yeah, last summer, I guess.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I've really wanted to have you on the show for a while, and I know we've been talking about it. Unfortunately, due to this virus, we have to kind of do it this way, but we'll make the best of it, and I think it'll be great. One thing before we kind of get started, I like to talk about, how I got to know my guests, or just maybe the first time I met them. And I was trying to think back. I want to say it was maybe right around 8 years ago. Maybe could be a little longer, could be just a hair bit less. But I believe I bought something from you on eBay.
That sounds about right.
Right. And then, of course, you have your play ball memorabilia catalog. Well, at one time you used to put it out twice a year, which you only do it once now, I believe.
Right.
We got to chatting back and forth through the catalog sale and got to know each other a little bit. And, then I met Chris Likens, and we started talking about starting up this Facebook group for Cincinnati Reds memorabilia. And, he kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do. And he says, "Hey, I know this other guy named Chris Gamble." And I said, "Well, I know Chris. I've known him for several years." So it was me, you, and him that kind of founded that group and got started. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. And of course, we've become really good friends since then.
Yeah, and the other thing I remember is, we met up at the National that time. That was first time we'd met in person. Remember that?
That's right. That was 2015 Cleveland.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I do. That's right. That's the first time you actually recognized me from like across the room. I was like, "Who's this guy?" Because we had chatted, but I had never really met you personally.
That's right.
I don't really quite know who this is.
Yeah.
You introduced yourself, but yeah, good times. Well, let's get into this. You got some great stuff to show us and some good stories, I'm sure. So one of the things I always start off with, what kind of got you started in collecting Reds memorabilia?
Well, I've been a collector most of my life. I've always, even since I was a little kid, I've always been interested in old things. Not necessarily sports stuff, but just, and I've been a collector, as long as I can remember. And so, I started off like most people collecting baseball cards when I was a kid, and then got away from it. And I discovered eBay about 20 years ago, just randomly, messing around on the internet. And I saw all this cool red stuff on there, and I've been hooked ever since. So really I've been going at it as far as Reds memorabilia for about 20 years, I guess.
That's quite a long time.
Yeah.
You've amassed a pretty nice collection, I'm sure. But now, is there something you like to focus on, or are you just kind of a broad collector? I mean, not necessarily like what type of item, but more, I'm saying like an era or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I like vintage. Usually the older, the better. And I think, I'm probably like most collectors, my collection has changed over time because my interests have changed. I would say right now I'm mainly interested in stuff that displays well, like signs and pennants and game used stuff and things out of Crosley Field, that sort of thing. It's what I'm mainly into now, but I still collect a lot of different type things,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that stuff's very popular to collect, and it can be difficult to find some of the stuff out of Crosley. And it's even to the point where even some of the riverfront stuff is getting hard to find. This stuff finds its ways into collections, and then you don't see it anymore. So
or into the Reds Hall of Fame.
Well, that's a good point. That's true.
Yeah.
So is there a particular piece that maybe got you interested in collecting from the beginning?
Well, when I first started collecting, I was into photos. I really like vintage photos, and the idea was not really to collect them to keep, but like buy them and scan them and then make a book, like a picture book.
Oh, okay.
But then I got more interested in collecting them than doing that. So one thing led to another, and then I started collecting other stuff besides photos, and so forth and so on. But I still want to do a book at some point. I've taken a lot of pictures of my collection, and at some point I'm gonna do at least one book about Reds memorabilia.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see you do that, and I hope you do. You are able to do that at some point.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to bring up your first item here. I'll bring that up for our viewers at home. This is a photo from the 1939 World Series. And this has in the middle, there's two gentlemen dressed in suits. And in the middle standing is Harry Kraft, who was a center fielder for the Reds at that time. And why don't you tell us a little bit who the guy that is on the left side of the photo, the shorter gentleman, tell us who that is.
That's actually my great uncle Hutch. He was a sports writer for the Hamilton Journal News, I believe. I don't know if that's still around or if that's what it's still called or not, but I think that's what it was called then. And he died before I was born, so I never got to meet him or anything. But my dad always told stories about how much he liked the Reds and how he worked for the newspaper and things like that. And I found that photo about 30 years ago in a chest that we inherited from my aunt, which she was his wife. And I found that photo amongst some other things. And that was really, I didn't start collecting memorabilia after that, but that was kind of like the first time that I got interested in that sort of thing. So that photo kind of represents, I guess, the first time that I started having an interest in vintage Reds memorabilia.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said how photos kind of were your really first love, and
Yeah.
this photo for you specifically has to be very special.
Oh yeah.
And that looks to be, that is Crosley then, yeah, because that's where your uncle would be if he was from the Hamilton newspaper there. Yeah, that would be Crosley Field.
Right, and they've got, if you look real close, I don't know if you can tell, but both of them are wearing press pins on their lapels or somewhere around there. And so that's either from game 3 or game 4, because the first 2 games were played in New York in the 39 series. So that's either game 3 or game 4 before the game.
Yeah, and they have their little press passes too hanging.
That's right.
That's hanging from the press pin.
Right.
Very, very interesting. That's a great photo, and you have to be extremely proud.
Oh yeah.
Have that connection with family like that.
Yeah.
Now, typically I like to ask, what you would value something at, but this particular item, I don't think, it's not about anything about value, because to you, it's sentimental. It's priceless, I would assume.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. I mean, if you were gonna, put a value on it, I would say it's probably worth less than $50.
mm-hmm.
But like you said, the intrinsic value is way more than what it's actually worth.
Right. Yeah. And then that's something like that, that stays with you forever. So, so we're talking about some of the players there, and that particular picture was Harry Kraft. Do you remember, maybe as a child or whatever? Now you live in South Carolina now, but there was a time you lived up here in Ohio, correct?
That's right. I was born in Middletown, and we lived there till I was about 5 years old, and then we moved south. But my dad's always been a Reds fan, and he raised me a Reds fan, and that's why I am. And but yeah, I've been down here most of my life.
Yeah. Now, do you remember like when you started going to some Reds games? Maybe in the 70s or maybe early.
I didn't really. I have Reds memories from the 70s, but I didn't really become a fan until '82.
Okay.
Which wasn't a good year to become a fan, but that was it. So yeah, so I've been a Reds fan since '82, pretty much.
And do you remember like some of the players back in the early '80s?
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of Eddie Milner. He was probably my favorite player then. Um, Dave Concepcion. Most of the good guys were gone then, but yeah, I would say Milner and Concepcion were probably my two favorite players that first year.
And that was right at the tail end of Bench. Bench would have still been there. Mario Soto.
Oh, Soto, yeah, of course, yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're kind of like me. You remember, Riverfront Stadium as the stadium that you went to a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into your next item. And now this next item, I don't know which is the front or the back, but I'm going to start with the side that has the team photo on it, and I'll call that the front. But this is I guess I would call it a 1919 score tracker, kind of an advertisement for, looks like Atlas Rubber and Belting Company.
Yeah, I think that was something that was put out by that company to score games for the 1919 World Series.
Oh yeah, and it's got the whole team. It's got a big picture of Pat Moran on the front.
Right.
And of course, that World Series, was mostly remembered because of the Black Sox scandal. But really, the Reds had a good team that year, and who knows? Maybe they would have won anyway, despite all that scandal stuff. Who knows? But really, that team is almost, in Reds lore, is discredited so much because of that, and that's really not fair.
Right.
But it's a great piece, and I'm looking here. It's got Pat Duncan, who's the outfielder on one side. On the other side, it's got Hod Eller, who was a pitcher. And then take a look at the back, because on the back is where we're actually talking about where that's the score tracker. And of course, that shows all 8 games. It shows the runs, it shows the hits, the errors, the pitchers, the catchers. And then there's kind of a guy holding up a globe that says Rubber and Belting Company, Cincinnati and Dayton. Hey, Dayton, that's where I'm from. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah. That's real. And then it's got a big shot of, it's Redland Field at that time. Well, it says Redland Field on there. Is this, I'm just kind of wondering, was this a time before scorecards or scorebooks?
Well, they were around then, but when they had special events like the World Series, there were all these companies, I guess, that tried to capitalize on it. So they would make their own scorecards or scorebooks and make them available to the fans. So you had the official ones, that the Reds offered, but then you had all these other companies that would do the same thing to take advantage of, the situation, so many people looking at it and that sort of thing. So I think that's what this is.
Okay, so really it was really a way for this Atlas company to advertise, is what.
Correct.
You think these are something? Because I noticed there's almost like a hole in it at the top, and that was put there on purpose. It wasn't like something that's torn. You think maybe it's
Yeah.
calendar?
I think it probably had a dual purpose. I think it was supposed to be used as a scorecard for the World Series, but then it was to be kept as a memento. I think that's why the holes are there, so people can hang it on their wall or office or wherever they wanted to put it at.
Right.
That's just a guess.
Yeah, that's very, very cool and a very unique item. I've never seen it before, and I think it's actually very cool that it's filled out. Sometimes when you talk with scorebooks or things like this, I've heard people they want them unscored. I've always been the opposite. I want them authentically scored. I don't want them scored at a later time, but if they look authentically scored, that's the way I want them. And how do you feel about that?
I agree. I think it adds something to it, because that person sat there at the game and did that and didn't just buy it, and so I think it kind of adds to it. But there are a lot of people that like things, in pristine condition, and I understand that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a personal preference thing, I guess.
Well, when it's scored, authentically like that, that's when it tells a story.
Mhm.
And that's what I like.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look here. I love this last item. I love everything here, but it's this last item is really amazing. So I'm going to bring that up. Now this is a 1952 Grady Hatton home jersey, and I believe Grady Hatton played third base. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and of course that's significant. I believe in '52. I used to really know my All Stars. I think '52 was his one and only All Star season.
I believe you're right. Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, and now this would be. Well, I'll let you tell us a little bit about this jersey here, this shirt.
Well, that kind of represents another, I guess, another stage in my collecting. Um, that was the first flannel jersey that I ever bought. And another thing that's really cool about it is it was a hand-me-down. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but back in the day, jerseys would be handed down to the minor leagues after they were used in the major leagues.
Oh,
So it went down to Columbia, where I live, and it was worn by a player for the Columbia Reds by the name of Hal Stamey. And so that makes the jersey even more special because I also collect Columbia Red stuff. And on one of the sleeves, there's sort of an indentation of where a patch used to be. That was the 100th anniversary of the Sally League down here. The patch had been removed before I got the jersey, but that kind of further verifies that it was here in Columbia, after it left Cincinnati.
yeah, and that patch where, as we look at that, that's says South Atlantic League anniversary, and in the middle it's 50th anniversary.
Or 50th, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, it's very cool. And on the back, we have, the number 15. Very cool. And, it's interesting. It just goes to show, where you can see where the patch used to be. It's like it was pressed in so hard that it to this day, it's still, you can still tell that patch was on that sleeve. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah, I think flannels are, I think they're the best jerseys to collect because they look great. They just have that old timey look to them, and and they have other things like the name is sewn in the collar, which they don't do anymore, and there's just things about it that's pretty cool. And back then, the players didn't have names on the jerseys, so most of these jerseys, when you get them up to a certain year, are all original because there wasn't any reason to alter them necessarily. So that's kind of cool.
And this looks like this, trying to make it out here. Let's see, this jersey was manufactured by, maybe you could see it. Do you know who manufactured that jersey by chance?
It's I believe it's Goldsmith.
Goldsmith. Okay. That
And
sounds
they were, or it might have been called McGregor then, or McGregor Goldsmith. Originally, the company was called Goldsmith, and then it became Goldsmith McGregor, and then it became McGregor. So I'm not for sure which one is in there, but that company was based out of Cincinnati.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
They supplied uniforms to the Reds up to a certain point.
Now, on something like this jersey, we know there's the flannels and the knits, and not everyone knows exactly what that means. But the Reds, they wore flannels up until what year? Do you know what year they?
71 was the last year the Reds wore them.
Okay. And it's interesting, even back as far as here, we're looking at an example of your 52 jersey here, and they still have the set number and everything. And that's something that went on for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what year the cutoff was, probably sometime in the 90s, I guess. But I think for the most part, there were two sets of jerseys issued for every player, from the best I can tell. Not like it is now where there's probably who knows how many jerseys are issued in a year's time.
Well, this is certainly a great item. And you know, you have a wonderful collection. When I was down to see you, you were kind enough to allow me to see it. And I greatly thank you for coming on the show, especially when we have to kind of do things a little different. We actually had planned to have you up here in Dayton, because typically you do the Moeller show. Is that you do that in April every year, or most?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's we usually get together when you're up here, but that obviously didn't work out this year.
Right.
So I'm happy we figured out a way to do this. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
Well, I'm hoping to get up there this summer and we can maybe do another one of these shows and just hang out like we do in your Red's room and have a good time.
Yeah, and get some Casano's pizza, right?
There you go, man.
Well, I got one little thing that I always do. I started doing last few episodes. It's called Something We Didn't Know. All right. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you can answer it however you want. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but it's just for fun. So I know you like to travel a little bit.
Right.
Where's maybe your favorite vacation spot? Where's your place you like to go?
Well, I didn't really have an answer to that, until a couple of years ago, and my girlfriend and I went out west, and we just had a great time. I mean, I really want to go back as soon as I can, hopefully later this year. But it's just a different world out there, and I really like it.
Yeah, I remember that. You were sending some photos, and you stopped at a lot of like kind of Reds landmarks along the way, from players and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one in particular was Willard Hershberger's grave out in California. I've always collected his stuff. I'm not really a player collector in general, but I've always been interested in his story, and I figured while I was out there, I would go visit his grave.
Yeah. Well, it certainly sounds like something. Anything heading out west is always a lot of stuff to do out there. So.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you for joining me once again, and I hope you enjoyed doing this. And until next time, happy collecting, everyone.